Layovers Flight 004 to Geneva. Hi, Alex. How are
Hi,
you?
hi, Geneva. Exciting.
This is my hometown
Yeah,
and my home
exactly,
airport.
exactly.
So lots of stuff to say about that one. We could also call this one the John Biggs episode because our dear friend John Biggs from TechCrunch has been telling us that the sound was still not up there, and we've made some tests last week. The tests were not live if you heard us on the podcast. We're hoping that this time the sound will be fun and good. Both of us will know it at the end of the recording, but I'm sure it's going to be working this time, so you'll see a vast
Yeah,
improvement on it.
fingers crossed. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed. And thank you to John for all of the tips and tricks.
Yeah, and I also want to give a shout out to Jeremiah Aryang because he's also been giving us a lot of feedback, also a lot of encouragement. So that's very nice to hear. There's a lot of other people on Reddit, on Twitter, etc. We'll have a few shout outs during this episode. So moving on to the news of the week, as every week. The first one is a bit of a reminiscence of the usual competition between countries and continents. We know the story between Airbus versus Boeing, but this time it's basically the Gulf Airlines versus everybody else. So we'll have a few U.S. airlines, the four major U.S. airlines, have sent a report to the White House and basically to kind of complain that the Gulf Airlines were not playing a fair game with when it comes to competition, and there was then a huge spat because obviously there were some reactions in the U.S., then reactions from Emirates in particular, then back reactions in the U.S. It's a game of ping pong that's pretty interesting to see. But before I go into some more details, what are your thoughts about this one, Alex?
Well, it descended into some rather nasty words very quickly. I was surprised. There was a lot of you need to improve. American airlines in general need to improve. The only reason why you can't compete is because generally you're terrible. I mean, it didn't say that specifically, but it was very aggressive and defensive words in many regards. I was surprised how quickly it escalated.
Yeah, it's a very touchy subject. So the report basically says that obviously Emirates and others, Qatar and all the Gulf airlines are subsidized. That's what it hints at. It even says that apparently Emirates would be subsidized to the amount of $40 billion, which is a lot of money, which obviously then the CEO of Emirates said, oh, it's laughable. Show me how we're actually subsidized. And he went into his own numbers. The same number is actually provided a few months ago because on the EU side has been also a complaint. I think it was Lufthansa, Air France, and a few others went to the European Commission and also talked about unfair regulations, to which the CEO of Emirates had replied, for instance, that what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the recapitalization of the pension funds for Lufthansa. So it's always funny to see. It's very hard to take sides here because this is extremely complex. All airlines have been at the moment in time subsidized, whether it's in the US, whether it's obviously in the Gulf, whether it's in Europe. A lot of airlines actually been born out of subsidies because they were state-owned airlines. Some of the airlines in the Gulf are still state-owned. It's true, but for instance, one of the arguments against U.S. airlines in general would be that Chapter 11, so the bankruptcy proceedings, are a form of subsidy or state aid. SAS in Europe was recently complained against for having received some type of state aid for also some restructuring. So it's a very, very touchy subject. But it's true that the focus of this debate has been directed towards the Gulf Airline because simply they're very successful.
Yeah, right? and your point about the bankruptcy is an interesting one, and that's what Tim Clark came back with and said, I challenge you on where you got that $40 billion number from. And also, all of you major U.S. carriers have in some form or another been bailed out by the government. So how is that any different from what you were accusing us of? So it was a very strange argument, indirect argument that I'm not entirely sure what either party was trying to achieve other than making themselves look kind of petty and small-minded.
At the same time, it's interesting that there was a kind of an unholy alliance in the U.S. because that report that was made to the White House comes both from the corporates from the U.S. alliance, but also from the unions at the same time, which is very rare to see them on the same side.
Yeah, very rare. And for United and Delta and American to all be singing from the same song sheet, it's very, very weird.
But it's in at the end. It's also basically they're putting a dent into the Open Skies Agreement. So the Open Skies Agreements are basically some kind of free trade agreement for airlines. So you basically can fly pretty freely from one point to another. And it's true that the Gulf Airlines have been starting to see a very big increase in the US. The report says that the share of booking for Gulf Airlines went from 1 to 13% overall. So it's a big increase. I guess they were so afraid. And I guess you're also reacting because Emirates is starting its route from Milan to New York. So they're not only traveling from Dubai directly to the US, but also are looking into other routes to the US. So certainly that scares, sorry to use that term, shit out of US airlines to say, oh, okay, so they're starting basically to go so big as to not only cater for the Middle East, but to cater for everywhere.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic. I think I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that we do a whole longer segment on this at some point and talk about deregulation and open skies and fifth freedom and all of that, because it's a question that comes up a lot. You know, why can I fly Air New Zealand from LA to London, but I can't fly Cathay from, you know, somewhere that's not originating in Hong Kong? It's a very good question. I think it's something that we should explore more.
Yeah, in terms of competition, I just wanted to mention it. Well, you're right. We should do that. There was another report I've read recently that says that if you aggregate the top 4 airlines in the US, it's 83% of the market. That same number, the top 4 airlines in Europe, is only 39% of the market. So it is interesting how the deregulation in the US has led to a huge consolidation, and suddenly now it's so you have on one side a very heavy consolidation within the country, and at the same time, a fear of competition from abroad. And I'm going to finish on a very funny sentence from Qatar, the Qatar Airways CEO who said, it is like you open a shop and there's a neighbor who is already established. Everybody knows him, so they mostly go there. You have to do something different for people to come to your shop. We attract customers by giving them a wow product.
Oh, ouch.
Wow, ouch, yeah. So we'll do a segment on that. Moving on to an aircraft. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there was a report in the Wall Street Journal recently that suggested that Boeing was considering reviving the 757, an airplane that it stopped making over 10 years ago. It's a great airplane. It served its purpose for and continues to serve its purpose for a very long time in a great. I don't know how many of you have flown on the 757, but you will not experience an acceleration and climb in any other type of commercial aircraft than you do with the 757. It's a great airplane, but with the advent of more efficient, longer range 737 variants, the 787 and 777 projects, there wasn't a whole lot of space left, so they stopped it. And so this report was very interesting that they were considering re-engineing the 757 or creating an NG version of it. And the argument put forward by the Wall Street Journal was pretty interesting, but almost days after that it went out, Boeing came out and said, no, we're not doing that. We're just categorically not. But it was interesting to hear Boeing say that they had considered it many, many times, but that the economics just, they don't stack up.
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons is a bit of pressure because there's one of the biggest leasing aircraft companies in the US, Aer Lingus Corp. Actually, so the founder is very well known, Stephen Udvar-Hazy, and I think he wants to have a better, more fuel-efficient aircraft, but he doesn't want to. It implies that he doesn't want to pay for all the fancy stuff that goes around a new aircraft. He says, please make a more fuel-efficient aircraft, but just do not go and make something as crazy as the Dreamliner.
Yeah.
That's basically a bit what he says. And this is why I think there was a bit of the pressure to Boeing to say, come on, re-engine, do something that is cheap for us because, the economy is not that great. We also cater to a lot of low-cost airlines, and we don't need all the fancy stuff around it.
It's really interesting because Boeing's argument is a sound one, that they just don't see the market for this. There's 550 passenger 757s still flying, but only 50 to 80 of those do transatlantic traffic that exceed the range of the longest range 737 or an A320 NEO. So they said, look, people are using the 757, and if they're not, they're just going to use a 737 or an A320. So there's a very limited market for that. And apparently what they are focusing on is filling the space between the longest range 737 and the 787-8. Now, again, it would be interesting to see if there's even a market for that.
One point though, you just mentioned the A321 and 737. So the A321neo clearly beats the crap out of 737 MAX 9. I mean, this is also one thing, is that Airbus is actually gaining a huge share of the market of that single aisle type of airplane. The A380 321neo is selling very well. Airbus has just announced the same version with the LR, so the long range version. And there's maybe also something that maybe Boeing should react there, because they seem to be losing their market. I think Airbus had like a very, they also more than double their market share in less than 10, 15 years. So there's something to that story that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I don't think we've heard the end of this, because like I said, Boeing have acknowledged there is a gap in the market that needs to be filled, and they are looking into it. And I guess there's also a thing that if you don't need to get a new certificate for an existing model, even if it's been out of production. Correct. So that would compress the timeline to get this aircraft to market if they do a new version of the 757. But my gut says that they won't, and they'll come up with something different. It's hard to know what. And I don't think that they know either. But I don't think we've heard the last of are they going to bring back the wonderful 757?
So another story that you and me will keep following on layovers. Coming back to a story we mentioned last week, we mentioned these new models like Surf Air in the West Coast in the US. There was a Rise that was born in Texas. We've heard that a Beacon, which is basically exactly the same thing on the East Coast. And the reason I wanted to mention that is we had a little debate with you, Alex, and I asked you, do you think this model will ever come to Europe? And when I asked you that, you said, yeah, probably in Geneva, which, by the way, is the title of this show. But you were actually not very far off.
Oh, wow.
Because I've seen one. I went and I've seen, it's called Take Air. It's based in Belgium, in Antwerp, but one of their routes is from Zurich. So you were not very, very far. So we're seeing that model also coming here. The reason I mentioned here in the news is because I had a little discussion on Twitter with a user called Derloos, DERLOOS, and thank you for the exchange. It was very interesting. And you use the term AirUber, like the car, like the car hailing service. And I would actually argue that these models are not exactly like Uber, because it's not like, oh, I need something now and I click a button, I get a plane. That was the model from Airpooler, but I was stricken down by the FAA, saying that most pilots using such service did not qualify, they didn't have the right license to fly commercially and to fly other people.
Right.
So these models are more like Spotify. You pay a subscription. Spotify is a music subscription system. So you pay and then you have all you can eat music. So this is a bit the same system. It's not Uber. It's more like I pay once per month and once per year, and I get as many flights as I want. I mean, there's some caveats, but don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a creative way to get around some certification issues that just weren't designed to accommodate the world that we live in, frankly, with the on-demand nature of our lives and crowd sharing and all that stuff. So I am delighted to be proven wrong that this model is blossoming, and that we could.
There's only two routes. There's, for the moment, I think it's Paris to London and Zurich to Antwerp. I think so. So it's very, very early stage, but it's always interesting to follow.
There's a huge opportunity here, I think, because the difference in price between scheduled carrier and charter is gargantuan, and there's room there. It's just, again, it's one of those industries that there's a high cost of entry.
Exactly. And talking about cost of entry and cost of fuel, and we mentioned a few weeks ago SkyMall. SkyMall was, apparently disappearing, and apparently it's reborn.
Yeah, this is
already.
This is unbelievable. Apparently there is a chap called Scott Jordan who is going to resurrect SkyMall, the very briefly bankrupt, it seems, in-flight magazine. I found out about this because a Facebook friend is involved in this little project. I don't
Oh
know
wow.
where it is in its infancy, or even if it's literally got off the ground. Um, but yes, this guy wants to resurrect and reinvent SkyMall and acknowledge its sort of campness and its badness, but actually kind of use that as a method of entertainment, and just not just sell things, but also have content and writing and stuff like that.
And I think they want to go both. They still want to go print, so they'll still have a print edition and actually multiple concurrent different print edition. But they also want to go digital, right?
Yes, which makes sense. I think that there's articles that you're going to want to share, and that's why they were funny in the first place, and you want to propagate them. But they have roped in Jim Louderback, who I like to consider a friend, who was the CEO of Revision 3 and really a pioneer in some technology content through the 90s and 2000s. So it adds some serious chops to the project having Jim on board, and I'm really interested to see what they do with this. And is the SkyMall brand tainted enough to the point where it can't be resurrected, or do we have a soft enough spot for it in our collective traveling psyche to welcome it back with open arms? If anybody can do it, it's these guys. So good luck to them, I say.
Yeah, good luck. Exactly. I would definitely be enjoying this. Maybe also we have access to it, although not being on the US flight. So we'll see where it goes. But well, another story to follow. See, we keep adding new chapters for
the ever-changing nature of the airline industry.
Next piece of news, everybody's heard about it. Expedia buys Orbitz, $1.6 billion. It's a very large acquisition. It's not only air travel driven. The reason I wanted to mention it here is because Orbitz, maybe you know that, Alex, was actually founded by major US airlines. The inception was actually only for flights. Then when the airlines cut the commission system in the US, they went also to expanded in hotels and all the other OTAs are doing. But I had this feeling that Orbitz was never able to find its place, which is probably the reason why it was left open to be acquired by someone like Expedia. So Expedia is cementing its large share of the market, and obviously going against Priceline in the US. But one of the things the reason I wanted to mention this is because the CFO of Expedia on just after the announcement of the acquisition said that for him, OTAs are clearly underinvested in the flight business.
Yeah, that was really interesting. And I guess what he's saying is that they've spent so much time on other areas of the travel experience, hotel, rental cars, and everything like that, that they've neglected the flight booking experience. And
correct.
I would suggest that the main reason for this is because the margins that they get on flights are microscopic, but compared to hotels and especially rental cars, travel insurance, vacations, cruises, where the margins that they take from those transactions is much higher. And that's resulted in poor investment on the flight side of things. Which
the other issue that they're having in general for flights is that the all new economies, the all new type of revenues are made by airlines. Choose your seat and pay for it. Have your
they don't get access to that.
They don't exactly. So you cannot do that from an OTA. You have to go through directly the airline website. So what maybe will happen at some point, there will be some kind of deal to be made here, or at least they will try to reach out to the airlines and say, okay, listen, we can also sell this for you, all these added little features that you sell to, and maybe have some type of commission. I don't know, it will ever happen. But the comment of the underinvestment in flight business was interesting because it might show that they will again try to push towards a better experience for buying tickets for flights on these sites. We'll see.
Yeah, or maybe even not a better experience, but more flexibility, like Kayak does with its hacker fares, where it does different legs on different carriers. A lot of the bigger OTAs, they just give you the kind of plain Jane search results. So this is only a good thing if they start to refocus on flights.
Kayak, which was bought by Priceline in 2013 for 1.8 billion. We're talking massive acquisition. Nothing to do. Priceline also bought OpenTable, I think, for almost 2.5 or 2.6 billion last year. I mean, this is insane. This is another type of consolidation. From consolidation to flight experience, and a very a nutty flight experience.
Oh, well played.
That was easy. Come on.
So you might have heard a few weeks before our little podcast got going that an executive on a South Korean airline or Korean Air was given a bag of nuts, and was so furious that she was given a bag of nuts that she didn't ask for, and that the bag of nuts was a bag and not served in a bowl, that she demanded that the airplane go back to the gate and the offending flight attendant be removed from the aircraft. It was a crazy story when it happened, and we all were like, "What? That's okay. That's a little bit over the top." But it turned out that this executive was also the daughter of the chairman of the airline, and the Korean authorities took her to court over it. And she's now been sentenced to a year in prison for interfering with flight safety. And I guess they got her on a technicality because while the plane was still on the ground, being pushed back and still actually attached to the tug, it was the plane was classed as in flight.
Yeah, in flight.
So they were
they were able to say, "Oh, safety is disrupted."
Safety is disrupted, and they threw the book at her, and she's been fired from the company, and she's going to go to jail for a year for this.
But I would say I was talking about this story. So I collaborate with the Korea Institute of Startups and Entrepreneurship. It's an initiative of the South Korean government. So I interact with a lot of South Koreans, and that story, was obviously very big, but it was big also because there's a huge debate about the type of corporations and the type of relationships between government, the type of having your daughter as an executive. These are the type of stories. This is why it resonated that much in Korea. And I think, even for us, obviously listening to that kind of story is obviously, it gutsmacks us, but I think it goes beyond this in South Korea. I think it's almost a national debate about how do we, all these, monsters from Samsung to Korean Air, all these big companies were created. And I think this is where the debate is taking place now there.
Yeah, it seems to have really moved that entire conversation about nepotism into the public psyche, which is interesting. So I think they were pushing for 10 years in jail for this infraction, which is insane. So I think a year is, I don't know. I don't know what's an appropriate punishment. It was certainly bizarre behavior, and I think as a couple of articles have suggested, the humiliation is probably worst punishment than going to a jail for a year.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And at the end of the day, and I'm not making any excuses, she was also brought up like that, probably.
Yeah, that's a good point.
A follow-up to a big story here in Europe, IAG buying Aer Lingus. So we said, I think it was 2 episodes ago, so IAG is a company behind British Airways at Iberia. So Aer Lingus, the board said yes. Ryanair is furious. Ryanair has, first of all, the government of Ireland has a stake in Aer Lingus. There's a debate right now. Will they actually be selling that stake or not? BA obviously pushes for it. So there's still a very big debate in Parliament as to which they will agree to this sale. Obviously, there's a lot more involved here. So one of the 2 things. First is the other airports. So there's a Cork Airport, a Shannon Airport, are heavily reliant on Aer Lingus. They will basically not die, but have a huge problem if Aer Lingus were to divest. Thus, they've asked for guarantees from BA. BA basically said, IAG, said, okay, we'll guarantee your slots for 5 years. And the other thing was that, like you mentioned, Alex, last time, one of the big pieces of interesting piece is this story is the landing slots at London Heathrow. And also here IAG said, okay, the landing slots that belong to Aer Lingus will be kept for Aer Lingus for at least 5 years. I think they don't want to go beyond 5 years of promises. For some, it's not enough. For some, it is. We'll see where it goes. But Ryanair is furious because Ryanair, at the same time, had a court order. They basically are ordered under EU rules, competition rules, to sell their stake. They are 30% almost, and the EU said basically, oh, you have to go to 5%. So not only they're not being able to buy Aer Lingus, but they're losing their share.
Yeah, I can't imagine that Ryanair is very happy about this. My gut says this deal is going to go through. It's just going to take a little bit of time, and there's going to be some intense lobbying on both sides. But I can't imagine that it would have progressed to this stage with both sides of having done their due diligence and it fall apart because of issues like this. And I'm glad that they are making employment and job protection a part of this deal. I think that's hugely important, especially in the travel and airline industry. But I have a feeling this one's going to go through.
Yeah, it's just more bargaining now.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Putting their cards. Back to Airbus, the A380. Have we mentioned it today yet or not?
No, I don't think so. But
it's one of
when the A380 was first launched, everybody's imaginations ran wild about how it was going to be used, what it was going to look like, and everything like that. And once the launch customers had unveiled their cabins, and they were so far ahead of the game because they had a clean canvas to work with. So we all then started thinking about, I wonder if anyone is going to get this as a private plane in like 10 or 15 years. Well, it didn't take 10 or 15 years for somebody to order one. It took, before it was even launched, I think somebody who had ordered one. All the way back in 2007, the first order for a VVIP A380 was placed by a Saudi prince. And I love this story because when he arrived at Airbus to place the order or sign the order, he arrived in his own 747-400. So the guy knows how to make an entrance, and this original story of the order taking place, the media went crazy speculating what it was going to have and what was confirmed and what was denied. And there were people were saying that this particular plane was going to have a concert hall with a grand piano, a hammam steam room, a full-size boardroom featuring a large perspex table which doubled as a huge touchscreen, ample parking space for a Rolls Royce, and it went on and on and on. All these artist renderings of kind of aeronautically impossible structures inside of an airplane. Well,
let's have a swimming pool.
Right, exactly. And actually, Airbus even came out and said, there will be no swimming pool. It is impossible. But then, so here we are 8 years later, and this airplane never materialized. It was apparently the deal was signed. The prince then sold the rights to the airplane. There's a 6,000 square foot internal cabin space on an A380. It was never designed nor installed, so it just sat there. It was a flight test A380 that they had then resold. So now Airbus have it back, and they really don't know what to do with it. And they
actually, I think originally the Prince Al Walid bin Talal also had an interest in too. He certainly has the money, that's for sure. There was actually, and I think I posted that on Layovers a few months ago. Lufthansa Technik has made, I think it was obviously CGI, so it was not an actual interior of the A380, but made how would the A380 VVIP A380 look like. I'll put it in the notes. It's pretty mad, pretty mad, obviously. But, and I think I'll also find those. For those who don't have the understanding of what these planes can be, some planes actually exist. So you just mentioned the 747 that the same prince has. And I'll try to find some pictures and put them in the notes as well, because what seems to be complete science fiction is actually not only science fiction. I mean, some of the pictures you can see about these planes, how these planes are made, obviously not the A380, but mostly 747s, is just insane already.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think we'll maybe at one point made a small segment on all because there are several 747s, and you, Alex, and I, we both like them. There's several of them actually used by VVIPs in the world, so it's pretty fun story to follow. Yeah. Going to innovation, the innovation part of the show. First, and I think that many of you listening to us might have seen it, is that JetBlue will start accepting Apple Pay. So Apple Pay is basically paying with your iPhone 6, iPhone 6 Plus, and soon the Apple Watch. So you'll be able to use your phone to buy, booze, food, and whatever upgrades at JetBlue. Is it something you're looking forward to, Alex?
Yeah, I think this was an inevitability, and it was really a race to the finish line for the first few airlines and retailers to milk any PR out of this before it becomes entirely ubiquitous. But it doesn't surprise me that JetBlue were on top of it. They're a very innovative and nimble airline, even considering their size. So good for them. Yeah.
One other thing that is actually very interesting is that one very major roadblock for paying with a credit card within an airplane is the absence of live link. So there can be more fraud whilst you're paying with a credit card, because when you pay with a credit card, there's a credit card check being done. I'm saying not in a flight. There's a credit card check being done very quickly. So they were able. Most airlines were able to lower fraud by using a system of blacklists, a system with a very aggressively lowering fraud. So it wasn't a big problem anymore. But Apple Pay, and I'm not talking about JetBlue, but in general, and coming back to your SkyMall story earlier, having a system that is more secure within the plane could also entice airlines to sell items that are more pricey, and to say not only sell like food and booze, but maybe go again into what we had maybe back in the 70s and sell much bigger stuff. Like sometimes, if you guys listening to us have flown to Japan, you can see in their magazines you can buy really expensive things. Sorry for my French here. Expensive things, and that's the reason that you cannot is because of airlines being afraid of having fraud, and having someone who has a credit card is not actually valid.
Yeah.
But having a system like that would actually maybe push towards it. We'll see.
Yeah, I think we're in the early days of this. It's an exciting time.
Early days. Another early days is drones.
Yeah, this was an inevitability that this was going to happen. The U.S. Department of Transportation has finally come up with some rules, or at least proposed some rules for the use of commercial drones in the U.S. And I think this is a good thing. Otherwise, you would have these, these things all over the place, and they'd be in and out of flight paths of aircraft, of airliners, and all that. So they've put a framework in place to at least kick.
Sorry to interrupt you. Actually, Dubai Airport last January was closed for a short time because there was a drone hovering around the airport.
Yeah, and they had a problem with Heathrow last year that several pilots reported it. So it is an issue, and I'm glad that they're doing this, because the commercial ones are going to be big. They're capable of delivering a payload, and that's kind of why people want to use them.
Yeah, but if you read the proposal, because as you can say, these guidelines are not yet in force. But one of the rules would be that you have always to have the drone
to
in
look at it. Yeah, you can only use it in daylight. It can't be more than 55 pounds in weight. Max.
Which implies that in terms of load delivery, you still have to have someone following the damn thing to being able.
Absolutely. So I think this is going to get debated by people like Amazon, who see this as the kind of last mile solution to a lot of delivery problems. So going to be something to keep an eye on over the next several years that will take to get this into law or regulation.
Yeah, I'll put a link to the proposed regulation for you guys to actually watch. And also, if you want to know the current situation, there's a site called knowbeforeyouFly.org, and you have a lot of information about what you have to do with your drone.
And just as a PSA, don't be a jerk with a drone. That's all I'm going to say. You know that thing where you're like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? You probably shouldn't be doing it. I love drones as much as the next guy, but don't ruin it for the rest of us.
Ever had Google Glass?
I tried it on once and hated it.
Yeah, well, me too. I tried it. Because Robert Scoble obviously was the one who handed them to me. So Google Glass, the project is not killed by Google, but the product, the first product that was available for the public is. So we know where it goes, but. Amsterdam, so Schiphol, the airport in Amsterdam, as starting trialing the use of Google Glass, and interestingly, not for consumers, for passengers, you and me being in the airline, but mostly for the staff that is airside and actually needs a quick information, that they're actually very able to very quickly call by looking at a plane and an aircraft to know some details about aircraft, some data of the aircraft, also the name of the gate. It's a trial. It's very early, but that is an interesting use case of Google Glass, which is not just, I'm going to see some tweets and watch a movie, but actually having direct feed of data to actually enhance safety at our side.
Yeah, I think we'll get there in the end. I remember I don't know, 5 or 7 years ago when augmented reality was the next big thing, and we would all be using it to enhance what we were
Yeah.
looking at with data overlays and everything. And in theory, it sounds a great idea. Google Glass, this is the next big thing. We're all going to be wearing them. Okay, yeah, not so much, but we'll get there. And I think, yeah, these are applications where it makes sense to
Yeah, exactly.
overlay,
And
real-time operational data without having to sort of look down at a screen and then look up
yeah.
to
Yeah, it's hands free,
exactly,
and
yeah.
you can, yeah, and there's a video, and I'll put in on the show notes. But you can directly see, oh, that plane contains dangerous goods. So you have stuff that comes to you live. Related, there was a trial by JAL, so Japan Airlines. I think it was last year, and also try to find the link where they would have the maintenance crew in Honolulu Airport. Having Google Glass was able to live feed directly back to the HQ in Tokyo to say, oh, like, sorry, I lost my train of thought here, to actually push the information back to Tokyo. So there was like, oh, we are able to see, what happens in maintenance of the plane at Honolulu live. So these are small applications. It was also a trial, small applications that can actually make a very big difference.
Actually, that moves very elegantly onto the next story, which is about electronic flight logbooks. So not electronic flight bags, which are basically, and I'm oversimplifying here, but they're iPads with procedures and manuals and processes for the flight deck crew. BA have become the first airline, a 787 operator to use and be certified electronic logbooks, which means that they can, instead of handwriting any fault that the crew notice, they enter them into the system, which is also matched against in-flight data, both in the cockpit and for the rest of the airplane as well, which makes it all so much easier to not only capture, but match against system output, and then send, as you were just saying, send back to operational and maintenance HQ for diagnosis in real time. So it's great, and I think it's obviously a lot easier to do this on a plane like the 787, which is just a giant computer with wings. So it's easier to do this from the beginning of a very small fleet than to reverse engineer it onto a bigger fleet. But it's a neat thing, and I think hopefully will improve the dispatch reliability of the 787 even more.
And this is not a trial. This is something that actually is
going
this
is live. This
is
they've received the certification. They're the first, and so it means that if a plane is coming in with an issue, the gate crew the maintenance guys can be waiting at the gate with all the parts and documentation that they need to fix the problem, without having to write it in, come in, read the pilot's scratchy handwriting, and then go and fix the problem. So it's a good idea.
I'm sure low-cost airlines would love that, because they would allow planes to actually, go.
Absolutely. Turnaround times, even with issues would be reduced.
Yes, exactly. Something lighter. We mentioned earlier today the VVIP A380 and 747s, and these crazy layouts. And talking about crazy layouts, Thomson Airways has apparently greenlit a family booth. So you would basically think about like when you're traveling in a train and you have these four seats facing each other. This is exactly what you have in a plane.
I feel like they had that like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. No.
Yeah. That's actually I wasn't born, but the pictures show that. But I mean, one thing is, first of all, is it just an announcement? And there's always been announcement about amazing new seats or experiences in planes, but we're still talking Thomson is the LCC. So do they really do not want to just maximize the place? I mean, I'm not sure that at the end of the process, when those were supposedly be installed in their 737 Max, which are coming up, they will just say, oh, you know what, let's cram as many seats.
Are they actually doing this, or is this just like something that they've proposed?
That's the thing. The word that was used during that conference, it was the Future Travel Experience Europe conference that happened last week, was it's greenlit. So it's there. I don't know. It might just be something that says, yeah, we have the possibility, and within the next 3 years, when they actually have to do it, they might just backtrack.
I mean, it is a good idea. Purely from
I love it.
From an experience perspective, it's a great idea. As you say, from a, revenue per seat mile and all that, maybe not. But I would love to experience. I have 2 kids, so I'm a huge believer in this.
Oh yeah. I would love it. Exactly. We'll see. I mean, another story that will follow. You just mentioned the 50s and the 60s, and we are coming up to the 60th anniversary of Lufthansa. And what are they doing for
So
it?
for 4 shows in a row, we have somehow been able to mention the 747-800, and here
Yeah.
we are again. So
Yes.
so Lufthansa, for their anniversary, are painting one of their brand new 747-800s in a retro livery from in the same style as when they first received their very first 747 in 1970 actually, and it looks great.
Amazing.
It looks so good. And I have to give Lufthansa credit because they have done quite a few of these retrojet liveries.
Actually, yeah, I spotted one in Frankfurt a few months ago. It was an A321, I think. I have a picture somewhere on my phone. It was amazing.
And they did the smaller twin jets in the same style as they did like the DC-3s and the DC-4s. So beautiful old school liveries. This one has got the 748's got the lovely kind of 70s retro chic. It looks so good, and I'm so
the only
glad
difference is the absence of the metallic part, because obviously it's composite planes nowadays. It's like like American Airlines cannot redo like their chrome type of planes anymore because of the new materials, but it looks amazing. So just for those who are listening, so although I just said that Lufthansa is going for Lufthansa is not only 60 years old. This anniversary is when they restarted operations after the Second World War. I think Lufthansa in a form or another is actually much older. I think for the 20s. I'm not exactly sure. I have to look it up. But so the 60th anniversary is coming up on April 1st. It's not an April Fool's joke. And Lufthansa has always been amazing at boosting the 747 when they actually received. I think they received I think it was one of the landmarks 747 that we received from Boeing last year. They made a huge mini website, like videos of
That's
the
good. I'm glad that somebody's
pilots.
Still cheering the 747.
Yeah, they're really pushing that plane, and I'm really, really happy about it. Coming back to more crazy things, and it's going to be shorter, but in the same conference that I just mentioned about Thomson and having this family booth, Ryanair was talking about smartwatches, and you're like, what? Do you even have an iPhone app? So for those who don't know Ryanair started as an airline that had almost nothing. You could go just to their website, and it was it. And it seems that in the past few weeks, month, they've been actually going to like a more softer side of Ryanair and saying, okay, well, they run an ad recently in a newspaper to thank their customers. They're actually promising a new iPhone and Android app to make the experience better. They said that the website will actually be clearer. And they just said, oh, well, looking into preparing ourselves for a smartwatch world when people could have a better experience in actually checking in the plane, etc., etc. So it's interesting change. I don't know if it's just words if they actually do it, but it seems to be that they are going in a direction. Maybe they are understanding that they reach their limits on being that rough airline can be. What do you think?
I haven't flown on Ryanair in a long time. I think I'm going to be flying them next month, so I will report back after that.
Without a smartwatch, though.
Yeah.
Very short news. First, both Alex and I loved the video. There was Swiss International Airlines released a video with an A320 actually slaloming on the Swiss Alps with F5 Tigers. It's breathtaking.
Yeah, it's extraordinary footage.
Yeah, so I'll put the link. Starbucks Delta is expanding their Starbucks initiative, so you'll have Starbucks on every flight that you take on Delta. I don't know if it's a good or a bad idea. I'm okay with Starbucks, to be honest. So I'm not gonna bash them. No, actually, yeah. I mean, come on. We live in the UK. What do you drink instant coffee?
God, no. I'm not a coffee
Everybody
snob
does.
by any stretch of the imagination, but I'll post something on Layovers about the statistics of instant coffee consumption in this country. It is extraordinary.
It is. And United Airlines is testing a new website, and the reason I wanted to say that there was a blog post about it. It looks like Windows Metro with boxes and stuff, but that's not the part. It had a few stats. They have more than 2,000 users per minute.
Wow.
They're doing $1 million revenue per hour, which is actually pretty on the website.
It's interesting that they would release that information as well.
Yeah, exactly. But what you might like, Alex, is that now when you actually do a flight search on United Airlines, you will also have information about the aircraft. You will now know what kind of engines are on the aircraft. So they will tell you that, on this 757-200, you'll have Rolls-Royce engine. I mean, these are the small stuff that they will add. I'm sure a lot of, air geeks will love that.
Yeah, I mean, I like to know exactly the model number, or not model number, but yeah, the type of airplane that I'm flying on. So I don't want to know that it's a 737. I want to know what type of 737 it is. I kind of don't care about the engines, but maybe other people do. I was booking a flight recently on a aggregator, and it said this flight is frequently 30 minutes late.
Oh yeah, I love that.
That is super useful because I was looking at tight connections too. So
exactly, yes. Especially from Heathrow, it's always there. So it's always late. Moving on, app of the week. So, did you talking about a tight connection and losing a flight? So there's this whole thing about passenger rights. What happens where your flight is either overbooked and you don't have a seat in it, whether the flight is canceled, or where the delay is huge. So there are many regulations. We're not going to go over all the regulations, but basically in the European Union, in case of overbooking and or cancellation, you have a rights. You can actually ask for cash, hard cold cash, or a voucher if you prefer a voucher. There are many rules that I'll put the link for on the show notes. In the US, it's a bit more blurry. They are also, you can actually complain and have stuff, but it's always difficult to do this. There's this app called AirHelp that it is both an iPhone and I think also Android app, and there's a website. And if you think that your flight has been, if you think that you have a right to complain and possibly a right to get compensation, you do that on the website, and the website does the work for you. So they take a 25% commission on it, but compared to, it's up to you, but compared to the amount of work that would be required to actually complain, because they even go to court in case, it's actually pretty cool.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm so glad that you do it. I think it's a very fair price as well. The intricacies and complexities, I feel like it's almost purposefully designed this way to make it impossible, and you just give up complaining.
Yeah, I gave up so many times.
And myself. you get counter offers, and so we'll give you 5,000 frequent flyer miles, and if you're not a frequent flyer, you might go, is that good, is that bad, I don't know what I'm legally entitled to, and then you try and go and find that information, and it's buried in statutes and paragraphs and all of that. So a service like this that cuts through and makes sure that you're getting what you deserve by the letter of the law can only be a good thing for the entire industry.
I agree. And to be fair, there are other services like that I've stumbled upon. The reason I chose AirHelp is that it has a very good balance of, the website is very nicely done.
It's beautiful.
It's very easy to understand. The iPhone app is even better. I mean, you can actually very quickly get an assessment of what you might get out of compensation, and at the same time the coverage is also big, because a lot of these services obviously centralize on Europe, because Europe has clearer rules on it, the EU, whereas AirHelp will also help you in the United States. So I think, and also in other countries I have not tested. They say Russia, for instance. I have no clue what the passenger rights are in Russia, but it's interesting, and I think that you give it a shot. If you think that your flight has been, if you've been unduly managed, give it a shot. I think it's really
absolutely
worth it. Topic of the week. So La Compagnie.
Yeah,
I can use my French.
That's beautiful. Yeah, so this is an interesting topic. The Design Air, which is a blog that we both love, posted an article last week about all business class carriers, and it got me thinking about that concept as a whole. In the last decade, there were loads of them. They seem to be popping up every month. There was MaxJet, EOS, Silverjet, and loads more all over the world that thought, right, we're going to get older model 757s, 767s, and put what they would call business class seating in them. A lot of them were the old school style business class seats as well.
And a lot of them actually failed.
Yeah, all of them did. Every single one of those ones failed. They didn't last.
There was also one called Hong Kong Airlines, I remember.
Yeah, Hong Kong Airlines.
So, yeah. But anyway, they all failed.
They all failed.
And
they all failed. Yeah, they were all failed. Okay, so there was one that was acquired by British Airways, and
come on, let me. It's another French word, l'avion.
Perfect.
So it was basically, I think it was, and I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was the same people behind La Compagnie, which is the new airline we're talking about today, did l'avion in 2008. But the reality is that, yeah, it was business only, but very quickly they had some kind of premium economy and some kind of economy. So basically, at the end of the day, it was like the other aircraft, because if you look at, it became Open Skies. Open Skies is the company that British Airways has, a subsidiary that bought l'avion.
And it flies Paris to Newark.
Yeah, and if you go on the website, you can see there are 3 classes. So there's not only business class. So La Compagnie, which is
it's just a regular airline.
Exactly, but actually they're trying their shot again. Maybe some people could say that 2008 wasn't a good time because the financial crisis was in full swing. So obviously it was doomed to fail. So they're trying their luck again. What's different this time?
Not, from what I can see, not a whole lot. What's interesting to me about this is that there's got to be a market for this. I can't understand how no one has done it. And then no one has done it well. I think that when you step on board an airplane and you see how packed the business class is, there's a market there for that type of traveler. But my guess is a lot of those people are there on operational upgrades. They are on frequent flyer upgrades. So really what I'm saying is the percentage of those people who are paying full fare is probably pretty small compared to the size of the cabin. But these guys, as you say, La Compagnie, and I can't say it nearly as elegantly as you do, are trying again. And they are going with this business class layout with good food and reasonable seats. But the thing...
Yeah, I mean, you said reasonable seats. They're good, honestly. I've never set foot on this plane yet. But the market has moved on. Even Air France and Lufthansa, and I'm not bashing these two in particular, but they were a bit late in moving on from their old type of seats to new kind of business class seats. They're moving on, and these are seats that are good. I'm not saying, again, for the price, because it's a very competitive price. It might be actually good enough. But what I'm afraid is that decisions, how do you decide to actually book a plane, especially through corporate, like if you have a travel agent that is given to you by your company, will be dealt with. They have pre-made alliances. That there's a lot of other factors that are
frequency.
Why would you actually go to a new airline that is not part of any alliance? I mean, I would love, like you just said, that somebody cracks this up and actually makes it work.
And I think that you would have to have an incredible amount of money to do it. And I think it feels to me that the mistake a lot of these guys make is that they're operating their new route from Luton Airport to Newark. Newark, I get. Newark is good for getting into New York. JFK is a nightmare to get into. But Luton, if you're a business traveler, are you going to want to leave the city of London and go all the way to Luton, which is basically in frigging Norway, to catch a flight? No. And I think that they're really doing themselves some damage by...
But come on, Luton also has a lot of private jets.
It does have a lot of private jets because the landing fees are so much lower than Gatwick and Heathrow, and the runway is longer than London City. But speaking of London City, the quiet underdog in all of this is that when BA retired the Concorde, that flight number, that special flight number, BA001, was then given to an all business class A3 18 or 19, which flies only London to New York, and it stops in Ireland, in Shannon, to refuel ostensibly, but also so you can clear U.S. immigration in Ireland.
In Ireland, yes, exactly.
So you get on your business class airplane, all business class airplane, with your great seats and your great food, at an airport that is 10 minutes from your office in the financial capital of London. You pre-clear immigration, and when you get off in New York, you're coming in through a domestic terminal. You don't have to worry about offload. That, on all levels, makes total sense.
Yeah. It will be very hard for La Compagnie to compete against that. I mean, I wish them luck. Their prices are indeed
good,
very low.
£1,000
right?
for two people return, all included.
And the pictures, and some of them are on the Design Air. The pictures also look good. The seats look good. You know, the IFE, even though it's a tablet that is stuck on the...
That drives me crazy.
Honestly, it looks like a very good product.
That drives me crazy, the whole tablet thing. It's like... Surely.
Well, we said last two episodes ago that was the future is having tablets. Although the future is maybe bring your own entertainment, right?
So I think the BA model seems to be really, really good, and you get so there's 32 people on a again, I can't remember. Oh no, it's got to be an A380. I'm looking at a picture and it doesn't have overwing exits. That makes me an airplane nerd. 32 seats, onboard mobile data connectivity. UK, EU, and US power sockets. So they've thought about the needs of a business traveler as opposed to let's make a really luxurious cabin. So very, very sensible approach by British Airways.
There's a comment by Ben Schlappig. He writes this blog called 1 Mile at a Time, and he wrote several articles about this La Compagnie, and he says there that apparently La Compagnie wants to capture 40% of the market, which is 4 million passengers a year between London and New York. And then he goes into like calculating what actually that does mean, and it just doesn't make sense, because he says that it's more like more than 2,000 passengers per direction a day, which honestly no airline can actually do. I mean, so even the way they're marketing themselves, we're gonna grab all the market, is maybe over the top. But I wish them luck, because I want really someone to try to crack that nut to actually make this model work.
Yeah, I do too. I think my guess is, though, it's going to be an evolution of the BA model rather than a new carrier.
Yeah, correct. And Singapore Airlines, sorry, I'm just going a little bit on tangent here. Singapore Airlines, if you hear me, please, at least for once, reintroduce the Singapore to New York flight, all business, because it was the longest flight you could ever take in a commercial flight in the world, and they stopped it. It was an all business flight, and I want to take it once in my life. So please reintroduce it for me.
It was an A350, was it? Was it A350?
No,
pardon me, an A340-500.
Yeah, and it didn't make sense economically, probably, but come on, you were like for 22 hours in a plane. I want to do it once in my life. Anyway, moving on to so this week's episode is called Geneva GVA. So the question of the week is basically, I think you got it, Alex, is basically about airport.
Yeah, so it came from Keir Whitaker, who is a friend of mine and a friend of the podcast, and he asked me after listening to the episode last week, what's with the weird 3-letter codes for airports? So why do Canadian airports generally start with a Y? Why is LA called LAX? And it's a very, very good question, and a quite a complicated answer as well.
Actually, yes.
Thanks, Keir, for making us do homework.
Come on. The one LAX is pretty easy.
Well,
right?
But there's a rationale. So the 3-letter codes in general were based on in the very, very early days of aviation, they were just additions to National Weather Service beacons.
Yeah, so it was LA, it was 2-letter, and at some point they added an X.
Exactly. They needed some bureaucrat.
So Portland is PDX, because P and D is the first and the last letter of Portland, and the X.
And the Phoenix, Phoenix, X. So when they moved from 2-letter weather beacon codes, and then they said we're getting more and more of these. The airports are springing up everywhere. We need more. So the 17,000 plus combinations of 3-letter codes ought to be just fine. So they just added an X to the end of it to show that they were an airport. It was the first 3 letters of the city. So Atlanta, ATL, Boston, BOS, Madrid, MAD.
Singapore,
SIN, yeah. So
SIN. So these ones are pretty easy. Actually, when you do, like we mentioned, Matrix. So when you do actually a search on a flight and on a ticket engine, these ones are the easiest ones because you put. By the way, if you put London LON, you'll get all the airports for London. So that's pretty.
So
cool.
that is cool, and some of them are a little bit. You're going, where the heck did it come? So Chicago O'Hare is ORD, and that's because the original field on that site was Orchard Field. So the ORD of Orchard was in there. St. Petersburg.
You have Charles de Gaulle. So CDG because it's the name of the airport.
Yep. Beijing is Peking, as the city was formerly known.
Oh yeah, there's a lot like this. I think when I was flying to India, so it's Mumbai used to call Bombay.
Yeah, so it's still BOM.
I think they avoid changing the name, the three
letter
codes
I think
too often.
Absolutely.
So they keep these names. I think it's valid also for Beijing, which is Peking, so PEK. So these are the old names of the cities that were usually anglicized names. So you see a lot of these as well. And then so Charles de Gaulle is in the Narita, so it's not in Tokyo. We'll take it. One other show will be about it. So again, it's a contraption of letters. So these ones are easy. But you said the one like you mentioned are very complicated because if you don't know the field, it makes absolutely no sense.
Absolutely. And I think, so when these were first coming out in the 30s and 40s, there were sort of these land grabs where organizations wanted to grab a specific prefix. So in the US, the Navy grabbed N. So all naval air stations started with N. So Pensacola was NPA. And then the federal government, the US federal government, grabbed W and K for radio stations. Q was for international communication. Z was for special uses. And so the lack of those letters, people had to get creative. So Newark, EWR is the middle letters of the but so Canada, there are some interesting theories about Canada.
Yeah, why is it Y?
Why is it Y? So originally it was C. It was always just, it was C this, C that. And to be honest, there's no clear agreed upon explanation about Canada. And I read an interesting one that originally it was the weather station thing. And then preceding the 2-letter code for the registration was a Y meaning yes, where the reporting station was co-located with an airport, a W meaning without, where the reporting station was not collated with an airport, and a U where the reporting station was near an NDB, which is a navigational beacon. An X was used if the last 2 letters had already been taken, and a Z was used if the locator could easily be confused with a US 3-letter ident. So, which sounds really, really plausible, and is even referenced in some early documents. But even though people still don't agree on why Canada starts with Y and not C. Now, if with the ICAO, which is 4 letters, they do start with C, so it's CYYZ.
Yeah, but if you're not a pilot or you work at an airport, you never use these. These are the ones.
So it's.
And I think there's also another rule is that 2 of those 3-letter codes cannot be too close to each other to avoid some kind of confusion. So this is also a reason why some airports, because the newer airports, the older one have the easiest ways. This is why LAX will always be LAX, and it's easy, or Peking is Beijing is Peking, but PEK. But newer airports have to get very creative, and they have to look at, there's a list of all these thousands of airport codes, and I have to find one that is not too close to another one.
Absolutely. So like San Jose in California was not the first San Jose to have an airport. So it's SJC and not SJO or SJE or whatever it might be, or SAN, which is San Diego. So it's same with airlines as well. I never thought I would.
Yeah, we'll do that once, but it's true. The airlines now. The traditional airlines is very easy. The new ones do not make any sense anymore, especially because it's only 2 letters. So they're going to numbers to actually be able to make something.
But there's almost always a reason for what might seem a random string of 3 letters.
Correct.
And some of them have some very nice stories behind them as well. So Akira, I hope that answers your question. I'm sure we can give you more concrete explanation of Canada, of why Canada. But hopefully that sheds a little bit of light onto why these airports sometimes have weird 3-letter codes.
Exactly. And moving on, because we're on the airport subject, GVA, Geneva, the first letter and the last two. So this is my home airport. Have you ever flown
Yeah, I
there,
have a
Alex?
couple of times. Talk about a picturesque location for an airport.
Yeah, so I was born and raised there. This is why I know the airport well. So I know a few tricks. First, a piece of trivia, obviously. So the runway is actually extremely long. The runway is longer than the runway that you have in San Francisco. It's slightly longer than the runway you have in Hong Kong, which is the shows that we've been doing before. It's on par with the 9L runway here at Heathrow. So it's a very long runway for an airport that is pretty small, and for a city that is pretty small. The
Wow.
reason behind that is obviously because in Geneva you have United Nations, you have all the bodies of the United Nations, from the refugees to the international property, International Telecommunication Union. You have close by in Lausanne, which they will also use the same airport. You have the International Olympic Committee. Yeah, so you have a lot of these bodies. Plus, you obviously have all the financial institutions. You have Nestle. I'm sure if you know your food and chocolate, you would know Nestle, which is one of the largest food corporations in the world. So all these makes it like it's a small airport, but it's not that small because they require all these to cater to all these businesses and organization. For those travel geeks, the IATA is based in Geneva, and eBase, which is one of the biggest business jets, very famous business jets trade fair, is also happens once a year in Geneva. And something you might not know, actually, a lot of planes come to Geneva to actually take the ink for their banknotes, because one of the largest companies and one of the only companies in the world that does the ink for the banknote is based in
Wow.
Switzerland. Yeah, so they come here. So the large, the very, the little trivia about this very long runway, besides the fact that it can accommodate in 747 and A380, is that at the beginning, part of it was actually in France,
The
neighboring
runway.
France, the runway itself. So what they had to do an exchange of territory to keep the France the same size as it was, and Switzerland the same size as it was. So now the runway is entirely in Switzerland, but Switzerland gave a little bit another part of Geneva back to France to actually make it
Oh, how
equal.
funny.
So now, in terms of tips, when you land, if you land from a Schengen country, so if you don't have to go through passport control, everything is fine, and you can skip the little part I'm going to tell you now. If you actually land from a non Schengen country, so you have to go through passport control. If you're in a bus, which always sucks, but if you're in a bus, there are no business class bus and separate. But always, and trust me, always go to the right side of the bus. These are the doors that will open first, because the passport control is still old. They're doing a new one, but still old. It can be very cramped very quickly. So go close to the door, and as soon as it opens, run into the little building, because that will get you faster to passport control. Then for transport, when you are at the belt, so before actually clearing customs, so even if you don't have any bags, I would advise you. There's a one box you'll see exactly at the left of the left of customs. It's not very descriptive. It's not very well advertised. But you can press a button there and you get a free public transport ticket for 80 minutes. It's much better
Wow.
than the cabs. The cabs in Geneva, sadly, and I was part of a commission back in an old job where we actually drafted a new legislation about cabs. It's not enforced yet, sadly. It's a long time. Most of them do not accept credit cards. So if you have an 80 minutes ticket, then what you can do, don't take the bus, which is fine, by the way, depending where you go, but take the train.
Ah.
Every single train that leaves from Geneva Airport stop at Geneva Central Station. So you can take whichever is the next train, unless you go skiing and then you just continue your way to the Alps. But you just go to the central station. It's not less than a 5 minutes ride, and you're already in the center.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
a
for
great
free, and
tip.
you still have probably 60 minutes and overtime to actually continue your journey with public transport, which is pretty cool in the city. So this is something that's really in case you go skiing. There's a seasonal terminal which used to be the main terminal, which now is basically disused, and they open it during the winter season for all the low cost airlines are coming for to transport you to skiing. So I've never seen it because I've never flown through there, but it's actually open only seasonally. Then when you go back to and you want to take off from Geneva Airport, a few tricks. For security is not great, so have some time. But when you arrive at security, because of the way it's located, most people, because we all heard, the herding behavior, we see the first door and we go there. There's the first, of course, there's a fast track, and then there are a lot of little ways to actually get into security. Go at the far end, because usually people just stack at the very beginning, and the far end is empty, and you'd go faster through security. And that even applies if you're in fast track, because there's a second fast track at the opposite end, which usually is empty, while the first one is not. So this is something that's actually useful. But because of that thing I told you earlier about, the exchange, that the fact that the runway was partially on in France, there was a special agreement before the Schengen agreements happened, etc. So you have a set of gates that very few people know about, the F gates. So before you clear security, it was an agreement made that people that would fly into Switzerland, fly to Geneva Airport, French nationals, could go directly to France without having to enter Swiss territory. And the same thing, they could actually go directly from France to the airport and take an Air France, usually Air France flight. Huh. They have actually their own, it's F gate, will have an own little, if you're Air France, they have their own little business lounge, for instance, etc. The trick is, even if you don't fly Air France, because most of them are there, or in France, they can be stringent sometimes, but with a nice smile, you can actually go in the F gate, even though you're not at the F gates, you're ABC gates, and you will actually get there and you can cut through most of the security.
Very
and actually
clever.
Get back to the main gates. They will not always do it, especially if it's busy. But honestly, if you just give a nice smile, and they will let you do it. I've done it several times. It works. They can be very stringent, but you never know. It's
very clever.
It's funny. Anyway, that's a lot of tips. You can ask me. I know a ton of other tips for that airport, but basically, mentioning, that last one. You said the airline code. So EasyJet, what is EasyJet airline code, Alex?
Easy Y.
Yeah, but actually, the air code, the
U2.
EasyJet in Switzerland, it's a different company. It's EasyJet Switzerland.
Oh, is it really?
So it's a different company. They have the same branding, but it's a different company because they take a. All right, we'll go into that for another time. But so if you're looking for on the board, you're looking for your EasyJet flight. Look for U2, otherwise you'll just not the band, the flight. And on this, I think we're going to wrap up the show. We actually went again over time. We're very enthusiastic about this, right?
Yeah, that's good. Lots to talk about.
Exactly. And guys, we'll see you next week, Alex.
All right, and stay in touch, guys. You know where to find us.
Exactly. Godspeed. Bye-bye.